She showed up on his doorstep soaked, silent, and broken, just a first name and a haunted look in her eyes. He offered her a room, not knowing she was the daughter of a billionaire, or that she would change his life forever. He was a single dad who had sworn off love. She was a runaway heiress who didn't believe in it. Neither of them expected a second chance to come knocking in the middle of a storm. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The rain came down in cold, stinging sheets, the kind that made your clothes feel like lead and your thoughts heavier still. It wasn't a polite drizzle or even a summer storm. It was the kind of relentless, bone-soaking rain that made the world feel like it was trying to wash itself clean. Daniel Hilton stood at the kitchen sink, drying a plate with an old dish towel. The house was quiet now. His daughter, Maddie, had fallen asleep an hour earlier after begging for one more bedtime story, and his aching lower back was reminding him that he wasn't as young as he used to be. He glanced at the clock, 9:43 p.m. Then came the knock. Not the hurried pounding of someone desperate, but a soft, hesitant tapping, 3 gentle raps that barely cut through the sound of the storm. He frowned and set the dish down. Living on the outskirts of town, visitors after dark were rare. Visitors during a thunderstorm? Almost never. Daniel crossed the kitchen and opened the front door cautiously. Standing there, soaked and shivering, was a woman. Her hair was plastered to her cheeks, strands of hair curling around her face in wild tangles. She wore a light gray trench coat that was thoroughly drenched, sleeves pushed up as if she'd run for miles. Her boots were muddy, her eyes red, though whether from the cold or crying, he couldn't tell right away. She looked young, mid-20s maybe, but her eyes looked older. I saw the sign, she said, voice trembling more from nerves than the weather. The room for rent. Is it still available? Daniel blinked, surprised. The hand-painted room for rent. Inquire within sign he'd nailed to the fence had been up for 3 weeks with barely a nibble. He hadn't expected it to be answered like this, by a rain-drenched stranger with haunted eyes. It is, he said slowly. But you're soaked. Come inside before you freeze. The woman hesitated just a second too long, as if weighing whether she could trust him. But then a gust of wind pushed at her back, and the chill made the decision for her. She stepped over the threshold. Daniel closed the door behind her and reached for the folded blanket that always sat on the bench near the entrance. He handed it to her. Here, dry off. You want to sit down? She nodded, still trembling, and took the blanket with shaking hands. The warmth of the house seemed to hit her all at once, and she let out a breath that sounded more like a sob. Her knees buckled slightly, but she caught herself. You okay? Daniel asked, brow furrowed. He wasn't sure if he was talking to a lost traveler or someone much more fragile. She nodded quickly. Yes. Sorry. It's been a long day. I'll get you some tea. He disappeared into the kitchen, flicking on the stove burner and setting a pot to boil. He glanced toward the hallway where Maddie slept, the old floorboards creaking faintly beneath his feet. Then back toward the living room. The woman stood now, her coat dripping onto the old rug. She looked around as if trying to memorize the details, family photos, a worn-out couch, a crooked bookshelf. Not judging it, soaking it in. He returned a few minutes later with 2 mugs of steaming chamomile. She had removed the coat and was wrapped in the blanket now, sitting on the edge of the couch like she wasn't sure she deserved to get comfortable. Thanks, she said, accepting the tea with both hands. They sat in silence for a moment. My name's Daniel, he said. Daniel Hilton. Linda, she replied. Just Linda. He nodded. Didn't push for more. You got somewhere to be? He asked gently. She hesitated. No, not anymore. Her voice broke on the last word. She blinked rapidly and brought the tea to her lips, hiding behind the steam. Daniel noticed the edge of a bruise on her wrist where the sleeve had slipped back. His chest tightened, but he didn't say anything. Look, he said after a moment, This room, it's nothing fancy. It's upstairs. Shared bathroom. I work most days, and my daughter's at school during the week. It's quiet here. Safe. If you need that. I do, she said, almost too quickly. All right then. He stood and motioned toward the stairs. I'll show you the room. As they climbed the creaky staircase, Linda paused halfway and turned toward him. Why are you helping me? She asked. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. The woman in front of him wasn't just tired. She was running from something. Or someone. But his instincts weren't sounding any alarms. Just a quiet ache. A memory of a different woman once knocking on his door asking for help. His wife, lost and scared the day she'd found out about her illness. I've needed help before, he said simply. And someone gave it. No questions asked. She nodded slowly, as if those words meant more to her than he could know. He opened the door to the spare room. It was small, just a bed, a nightstand, and an old dresser, but clean and warm. This okay? He asked. Linda stepped inside and let out a breath, as though she hadn't exhaled in days. It's perfect. Daniel left her with a set of fresh towels and quietly closed the door. Back downstairs, he checked on Maddie one more time before heading to bed. The rain still tapped at the windows like soft fingers on glass, but the storm inside the house had started to settle. And upstairs, in a small room that felt safer than any place she'd ever known, Linda curled up under the blankets and cried, but not from fear. From relief. She didn't know it yet, but this house, this man, and the little girl who would soon call her Lily, would change her life forever. Morning came softly to the Hilton household, golden light slipping through the curtains and settling on the hardwood floors like spilled honey. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky washed clean and air sharp with autumn. The scent of coffee drifted from the kitchen, mingling with the faint sounds of cereal being poured and a child humming an off-key tune. Daniel stood at the stove in his usual Saturday morning rhythm, one hand flipping pancakes, the other holding a mug of coffee. He'd barely slept, thoughts of the strange woman upstairs chasing him through restless dreams. She hadn't said much, but what she hadn't said had echoed louder than her words. Just Linda. No last name. No mention of family, friends, or where she'd come from. He didn't push her last night, and he wasn't going to this morning either. But the part of him that had learned to protect Maddie at all costs stayed alert, even as another part, a quieter, softer part, was already hoping she'd stay. The sound of hesitant footsteps on the stairs made him glance up. She appeared slowly, like someone unsure if they were welcome. She was barefoot, wearing an oversized sweater and clean jeans he suspected she'd brought in that tattered backpack. Her long hair was pulled into a messy bun, a few strands falling loose around her face. She looked tired, but human again, less like a ghost. Maddie was the first to notice her. The little girl sat at the table in pink pajamas with flying unicorns, a milk mustache on her upper lip and a piece of pancake halfway to her mouth. Her eyes lit up. "You're the lady from last night," she blurted. "Linda," Daniel said gently, glancing at Maddie. "She's renting the spare room for a little while." Linda smiled, the expression tentative but genuine. "Good morning, Maddie. You remember my name?" Maddie asked, surprised. "Of course. You were very polite when you offered me your blanket." Maddie beamed with pride. "I'm a great helper. Want some pancakes?" "I'd love some." Daniel motioned toward the coffee pot. "There's some left. Mugs are in the cabinet to your left." She poured herself a cup and sat across from Maddie, warming her hands on the ceramic like it was the first hot thing she'd held in days. "So," Maddie began, tone very serious, "do you have a dog?" Linda blinked. No. Not at the moment." "Too bad. If you had one, you'd be almost perfect." Daniel chuckled and slid a plate of pancakes in front of her. "Don't take it personally. She's been campaigning for a dog since she learned the word puppy." "I'm great with animals," Maddie added. "And secrets. I won't even tell Dad if you have a secret dog hidden in your room." Linda laughed, truly laughed, for the first time. The sound surprised all of them, herself included. And just like that, something invisible shifted. The tightness in her shoulders eased. The mask she wore loosened. She ate slowly, savoring each bite as though pancakes had never tasted so good. Maddie chattered on, describing her school, her favorite dinosaur, and the merits of eating dessert before dinner. Linda listened with wide-eyed interest, laughing at all the right moments. Daniel stayed quiet, observing from the kitchen. There was something mesmerizing about watching Linda interact with his daughter, like watching a wild animal begin to trust again. No sudden moves, just warmth and space. He didn't know her story, but he was beginning to understand her spirit. After breakfast, Linda offered to help with the dishes. Daniel accepted. They worked in comfortable silence, hands brushing once or twice at the sink. Neither commented, but both noticed. "You don't have to help, he said, drying a plate. "I know," she said. "But I want to." She glanced toward the window, watching as wind stirred the last leaves from the sycamore tree in the front yard. "This place," she said after a moment, "it's quiet. Peaceful." Daniel nodded. "It's not much, but it's home." Linda hesitated. "I've never really had one." He looked at her, surprised by her honesty. "You will," he said softly. "Eventually you will." Later that afternoon, while Daniel worked in the garage fixing up an old pickup truck, Linda sat on the front steps sipping her second cup of coffee. Maddie brought out a stack of picture books and plopped down beside her. "Do you like fairy tales?" Maddie asked. "I do," Linda said, smiling. "Me too. But they're kind of wrong sometimes." "Oh, yeah. Like the princess always needs saving. Or the prince shows up and makes everything better. But my daddy says real life is messy." Linda stared at the little girl, heart tugging. "Your daddy's a smart man." "Yeah, he's the best." Maddie paused, then leaned in, whispering like she was sharing top-secret information. "He's lonely, though. I think he misses hugging someone taller than me." Linda tried not to laugh. "Well, I'm sure he's got lots of people who love him." Maddie shrugged. "Maybe. But none live here." She returned to her book like nothing had happened, leaving Linda to sit there with the weight of those words, and the echo of something stirring in her chest. That night, after Maddie was asleep and the house had settled into its usual hush, Linda stood at her window, looking out at the stars. She should have felt guilty for being here, for not telling Daniel who she really was, for hiding behind a first name and a broken smile. But for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't hiding. Maybe she was healing. The days passed gently, like pages turning in a well-worn book. By the third week, Linda had woven herself quietly into the rhythm of the Hilton household. She wasn't trying to take up space. If anything, she still walked like someone who didn't want to leave footprints, but her presence lingered in the little things. The coffee pot was always full now when Daniel came downstairs in the morning. The junk drawer, once a tangled graveyard of batteries and expired coupons, had been mysteriously organized. And Maddie, she was becoming downright attached. "Linda braided my hair today," she announced one evening as Daniel tucked her in. "Like real braids. Not the loopy ones you do, Daddy." Daniel smirked, brushing her bangs aside. "You saying I'm not a professional stylist?" "I'm saying Linda has magic hands. Like a fairy. Or a hair witch." "Well," he chuckled, "remind me to thank the witch." But he did thank her later that night. They were both in the kitchen, Linda drying dishes while Daniel sorted through the mail. Bills, coupons, a flyer for a church bake sale. He almost missed it. A glossy magazine cover, Whitmore Global Quarterly, tucked between envelopes. On the front was a photograph of a tall man in a suit shaking hands with the mayor. And beside him, in the background, was someone who looked uncannily like Linda. Daniel blinked. He looked again. Same hair, same jawline. But she wore makeup, heels, and that polished, distant expression people in boardrooms wore like armor. Before he could ask, Linda spoke. "You okay?" He looked up. "Yeah. Just tired." He didn't ask. Not yet. Linda had started coming into the garage during Daniel's weekend shifts. At first, she only watched, curious but clearly out of her depth. Then she started handing him tools. Then asking questions. Why does that smell like burnt eggs? She asked once, holding her nose as he drained an oil pan. That, Linda, is the sweet aroma of a 2001 Camry that hasn't had a filter change since the Bush administration. She wrinkled her nose. Disgusting. You get used to it. I'm not sure I want to. But she smiled. And then she stayed. Their laughter came easier now. The silences more comfortable. Daniel started to forget the early awkwardness of their encounter. Forget the caution in her eyes, replaced by something warmer. Braver. One evening, after a full day spent fixing brakes and replacing tires, they sat on the back porch sipping beers while Maddie played with sidewalk chalk in the driveway. I like this, Linda said softly. This? Daniel asked, gesturing to the chipped porch swing and his grease-stained jeans. All of it, she said. The quiet. The normal. I've never had this kind of peace before. He glanced at her sideways. You talk like you came from a war zone. She was quiet for a moment, then looked up at the sky. In a way, I did. Daniel didn't ask what she meant. He just nodded and let the silence hold space for her. Then Maddie shouted from the driveway. Come see my drawing. They both got up and walked over. On the cracked pavement was a colorful chalk mural, 3 stick figures holding hands. One had a beard. One had long brown hair. And in the middle was a little girl with a crown. Underneath it, Maddie had written in big, uneven letters. My family's sparkling heart. Daniel felt his throat tighten. Linda knelt down, tracing the chalk lines with her fingers. That's beautiful, she whispered. You're part of it now, Maddie said matter-of-factly. You live here. That makes you mine, too. Linda looked up at Daniel, startled. He smiled gently. She's not wrong. And for the first time, Linda felt the dangerous weight of belonging settle into her bones. That night, after Maddie was in bed and the moon hung low and full above the trees, Daniel found Linda on the porch again. She wore a blanket over her shoulders and was sipping tea. Couldn't sleep, he asked. She shook her head. Too many thoughts. He sat beside her. Want to tell me what's chasing you? She hesitated. He waited. I used to live in a world where nothing was ever quiet, she said finally. Big meetings. Bigger expectations. My father, he runs a company. A global one. And I was supposed to take it over. Groomed since I was a teenager. Perfect grades. Perfect manners. Perfect life. Daniel didn't say a word. But I didn't want that life, she continued. I didn't want to be a pawn on his chessboard. I wanted to feel free. So I left. Ran, actually. Just disappeared. Daniel's voice was low. And the media? Your father? They think I'm having a breakdown. Or they're spinning stories to save face. But I don't care anymore. I just needed to breathe. She turned to him, eyes shining in the moonlight. And then I found this place. You. Maddie. And I remembered what peace feels like. Daniel studied her, his chest tight with unspoken thoughts. He wanted to say that she could stay as long as she wanted. That she was safe. That she was no longer just passing through his life, but part of it. But instead, he just reached over and covered her hand with his. I'm glad you're here, Linda. Whatever you're running from, you're not alone anymore. Their eyes met. And for the briefest moment, something passed between them. Something warm and quiet and electric, like a match struck in the dark. Neither of them moved. But neither of them looked away. The leaves had begun to turn. It was the kind of fall morning that made you believe in second chances. Sunlight dappling through golden trees, the air sharp but not cruel, the scent of wood smoke and cinnamon lingering faintly in the distance. Inside the Hilton house, Maddie was running late. Linda, she called from upstairs, breathless. I can't find my other sock. Linda poked her head out of the hallway bathroom, toothbrush in one hand, a comically large bun on her head. Check under your bed again. I did. It's gone forever. Lost in the sock dimension. Daniel sipped his coffee at the kitchen table and smiled. It was becoming a familiar scene. Maddie yelling, Linda wrangling, the morning chaos offset by the quiet joy of something that felt whole. A family. An unspoken rhythm had formed in the house over the past month. Linda helped Maddie with school projects. She joined Daniel in the garage on slow afternoons. They cooked together. She was terrible at grilling, but excellent with pasta. Their conversations got deeper. Their silences more intimate. Sometimes Daniel caught himself staring at her when she laughed. Not just because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she looked alive in a way she hadn't when she arrived. And sometimes she caught him looking. She never looked away. But it was only a matter of time before the world she left behind came looking for her. It happened on a Wednesday. Daniel had taken Maddie to her after-school piano lesson, and Linda was home alone. The house was quiet, warm, filled with the smell of banana bread cooling on the counter. She was curled up on the couch with a book, something light, sweet, romantic, when a knock came at the door. Not soft, not hesitant, firm. She froze. Carefully, she set the book down and approached the door, peering through the peephole. Her breath caught. A black car idled in the driveway. On the porch stood a man in a tailored gray suit and a Bluetooth earpiece, flanked by a woman in heels holding a clipboard. No badges. No smiles. Just corporate calm. Linda's hand trembled on the doorknob. They had found her. She didn't open the door. Instead, she backed away slowly, heart hammering. The man knocked again. Then he raised his voice. "Miss Whitmore, we're here on behalf of your father. He's requesting your return." She stepped back into the kitchen, her entire body pulsing with adrenaline. The woman outside spoke now, gentle, rehearsed. "We're not here to force you, but we do ask that you hear us out. He's worried. He's willing to negotiate." Linda's hand gripped the counter. Negotiate? Of course. She waited motionless as the minutes dragged on. Eventually, the footsteps retreated. The car door slammed shut. The engine started. Tires crunched down the gravel drive. Only when the sound faded did she finally breathe. And only when Daniel returned hours later did she tell him the truth. They were in the kitchen. Maddie was asleep upstairs. Linda stood with her arms folded tightly across her chest, as though holding herself together with sheer will. "My last name is Whitmore," she said. Daniel, drying a dish, paused. "As in?" "Yes. My father is Charles Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Global. Billionaire. Investor. Control freak." Daniel set the towel down slowly. "That's a hell of a thing to hide." "I didn't come here to lie," she said quickly. "I came here to be invisible, to find something real. I couldn't lead with that name. I've lived my whole life being that name." Daniel leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "And now men in suits are coming to our door." She looked up at him, eyes filled with something sharp and scared. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to touch you or Maddie. I just needed space to breathe. I thought I could disappear long enough for him to give up." Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then, in a low voice, "Are you running from danger?" She hesitated. "No, not violence. Just control. Expectations. My life was mapped out before I could even choose my favorite color. And when I said no, when I refused the arranged engagement, the press tour, all of it, he flipped." Daniel let out a slow breath. He looked at her differently now. Not with anger, but with the gravity of someone realizing the woman in front of him had chosen this. His humble home, his loud kid, his messy garage, over a life of wealth and power. "You could have stayed anywhere," he said. "A resort, a penthouse. But you ended up on my porch in the middle of a storm." "I didn't want a place," she said softly. "I wanted a person who wouldn't want something from me. Someone who didn't care about the name." She stepped closer, voice trembling. "You and Maddie, you made me feel like I mattered. Just as Linda. Just a girl with a bruised heart." Daniel's jaw clenched slightly, his eyes softening. "You should have told me," he said. "Not because I wouldn't have taken you in, but because I want to know you. All of you. I'm telling you now," she whispered. He nodded, stepping closer. And for the first time, he reached out, his hand brushing her cheek, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Her breath caught. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what?" "For seeing me. Not her. Just me." Daniel didn't answer. He just leaned in, forehead resting against hers. "No kiss." "Not yet." Just the quiet electricity of two people realizing they weren't alone in the world anymore. That night, after Linda returned to her room, Daniel sat alone on the couch. He opened his laptop and searched Charles Whitmore. Linda Whitmore. Heiress disappearance. Missing for 41 days. The articles poured in. Headlines. Speculations. A world far louder and glossier than anything he had ever known. And yet, none of those stories matched the woman asleep upstairs. She was no heiress to him. She was the woman who danced barefoot in his kitchen. The one who taught Maddie how to braid. The one who smiled like it cost her something. And he was falling for her. One quiet heartbeat at a time. It had been 3 days since Linda revealed her full name, and the world it came from. Since then, the house felt the same, but different. The routines remained. Breakfast still happened at 7:30. Maddie still begged for extra syrup. Daniel still cursed at rusty bolts in the garage. But between the familiar beats, there was something new threading itself into the silence. Something warm, tender, unspoken, and growing. Linda lingered longer at the kitchen table after meals, her hand occasionally brushing Daniel's. He didn't pull away. They spoke in softer tones, held each other's gaze longer, smiled for no reason. Still, they hadn't talked about what this was. Until Friday night. Daniel had closed the shop early. The sky was bruised with twilight, streaks of peach and lavender bleeding over the treetops. Maddie was staying the night at her friend Lily's house across town. Her backpack had been bigger than she was. "You'll miss me," she declared before climbing into Lily's mom's car. "But don't worry, I left you cookies." She had. 4 of them. All lopsided. All perfect. The house was quiet now. Daniel and Linda stood in the kitchen, side by side, watching tea steep in mugs like neither of them knew what to say. The silence wasn't awkward, it was dense. Charged. Like the stillness before a first kiss or the moment before a dam breaks. Finally, Linda turned to him. "I know this isn't the life you asked for," she said, voice low. "Me showing up. All of this." He shook his head. "You didn't wreck anything, Linda. You made this place feel more alive." She looked up at him. "Even knowing who I am?" Daniel stepped closer, the tea forgotten. "You think I care about money? About titles? I care about the woman who reads fairy tales with my daughter and leaves coffee for me when she knows I'm running late." A pause. "I care about you." The space between them vanished. Their lips met, tentative at first, then deeper. The kind of kiss that tasted like truth. Like relief. Like every unspoken thing they'd been carrying between them finally finding a place to land. When they pulled apart, Linda whispered, "I've never felt safe like this before. Never wanted to stay." Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "Then stay." She nodded. A soft, fierce thing. "I want to." That night, they sat curled on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, as if the universe had finally remembered how to be kind to them both. Outside, the stars blinked awake, and inside, love bloomed. Not in a grand gesture, but in a quiet, lasting way. 3 months later, the house on Sycamore Lane had changed, subtly but unmistakably. There were now tiny ceramic pots of herbs on the kitchen windowsill, Linda's doing. Daniel's old couch had been replaced with a second-hand sectional she and Maddie had picked out after. A long day of furniture testing where Maddie had declared, "This one feels like napping on a cloud." The garage had a new set of tools, a birthday gift from Linda, who'd saved up quietly from the online design work she'd picked up under a pseudonym. And on the mantel, next to the framed photo of Daniel and Maddie at the beach, was a new photo. The 3 of them, Daniel, Linda, and Maddie, sitting on the porch, arms tangled, faces glowing. Family. Linda never returned to her father's company. She did, however, meet with him. Once. She traveled back to the city for a single afternoon. No security, no press, just 2 people in a corner cafe with decades of misunderstanding between them. "I see now," Charles Whitmore had said, looking across the table at the daughter he hadn't recognized until she left, "that I built an empire and forgot to build a home." Linda had looked at him with calm grace. "Then I hope you learn how." But I've already found mine. She walked away lighter. Back in the small town, she launched a local nonprofit, Second Path, focused on helping women rebuild after leaving controlling families, abusive homes, or high-pressure lives. It started with 3 clients. A year later, it had helped nearly 100. Daniel supported her in every way. Fixed the plumbing in her tiny office. Built furniture for the waiting room. Showed up to every fundraiser in his oil-stained jeans, holding her hand like she was the only woman in the room. They weren't flashy. They didn't need to be. Love, for them, wasn't about sweeping gestures. It was about morning pancakes, muddy boots at the door, and Maddie crawling into their bed on stormy nights whispering, "I had a bad dream, but now I'm okay." On a crisp spring afternoon, under the old sycamore tree in their backyard, Daniel proposed. It wasn't grand, just a picnic, a blanket, a ring tucked inside Maddie's favorite book of fairy tales. "Because," he said, "I don't need a castle. I just need this. You. Maddie. Us." Linda said yes with tears in her eyes and dirt on her knees from gardening. They married in the same backyard that summer. Maddie was the flower girl and the officiant, depending on who you asked. The only guests were close friends, a few neighbors, and laughter. As they danced that night beneath string lights and fireflies, Linda whispered in Daniel's ear, "I used to think love had to be loud. Now I know, it's the quiet moments that hold the most." He smiled. "I guess home isn't a place." "No," she said, eyes shining. "It's a heart that stays." We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.